So people know my background from yesterday's speech, that my real specialty is artificial intelligence and robotics and redefining what human beings will be in the future. And a lot of people find this scary. I don't want to be redefined. I don't like this idea, something that's beyond my control. The very sense of self is going to be altered. Well, you're actually under a lot of control systems, and you have been since birth. So I was talking a little bit about, mind control in particular, and something that I worked on that I'm not proud of, but it's called the voice of God weapon. So there are 4 different techniques and technologies that can pipe voices into an individual's head. And once you can do that, you can control them using neuro-linguistic programming techniques. You're rewiring their thought processes and brains. And so this gets into what's called offensive information warfare. And they used it, I believe, in the Gulf War to tell the enemy at that time, lay down your guns, this is Allah. And it worked pretty well, because hearing voices which have no direction or sound, you have to assume that it's some spiritual entity. So it works pretty well. And then, I don't know if I'm going to get into this, but there's something called hyper game theory. How do you, they want to see if they can manipulate people to do things that are irrational, but also walk them to their death. And so you can call it a eugenics program even. And they need to sample all cultures, language, throughout the world to define their probability matrices of which tricks, techniques, deception works. That's just what's happening. Now we have, which are magnetically activated nanoparticles and sensors. So how do you control a brain? Most people don't believe that. Oh, you can't control me. I have my own free will. There's no way you can get to my soul. Well, sorry, that's not true. So these nanoparticles are activated under certain magnetic frequency and will alter the brain patterns and pathways. Recently, my school came out, Harvard came out with what you see here on the right slide is the magnified view of a needle that's injected into the brain and puts the scaffolding over the brain, and then it's read that way at a much finer resolution. So let's talk about a little bit about deciphering the audio and visual cortex. So researchers at the University of California, Berkeley have invented a brain decoder device that's able to work out what you're thinking based on neural activity inside of the brain. Now they use mostly what's called functional MRIs. But you could use any of these technologies I talked about. If you're reading text in a newspaper or book, you hear a voice in your own head. Usually, most people are reading kind of aloud in their own head. Well, they can read that, decipher the words that you were thinking to yourself. So there's another one, University of LA, maybe Stanford University. They are decoding visual images. So they train the person under a functional MRI, that's the standard technique, to look at images, and then they record them, and then they ask the person to imagine the object. It can also just be imaginary. And the computer will decipher the brain code, and so you're looking at a hammer, you're looking at a saw, that's a house, that's a cat. So the technology in the civilian sector is coming along quite quickly. Somebody apparently from NASA leaked this as something they were working on. And telepathy, electronic two-way communications. Well, we have that now. And that's very scary if you never experienced it. Making humanity think an alien invasion is about to occur at every major city. Well, we have holograms in the sky. I describe that technology. And, you know, they talked about other things that might make this come about. But all I am saying is beware.
It's actually emitting ultrasound, low-level ultrasound that's about 100,000 vibrations per second. And the sound that you're hearing, unlike a regular speaker on which all the sound is made on the face, is made out in front of it in the air. The air is not linear, as we've always been taught. You turn up the volume just a little bit, I'm talking about a little over 80 decibels, and all of a sudden the air begins to corrupt signals you propagate. Here's why. The speed of sound is not a constant. It's fairly slow. It changes with temperature and with barometric pressure. Now imagine, if you will, without getting too technical, I'm making a little sine wave here in the air. Well, if I turn up the amplitude too much, I'm having an effect on the pressure, which means during the making of that sine wave, the speed at which it is propagating is shifting. All of audio, as we know it, is an attempt to be more and more perfectly linear. Linearity means higher quality sound. Hypersonic sound is exactly the opposite. It's 100% based on nonlinearity. An effect happens in the air. It's a corrupting effect of the sound, the ultrasound in this case, that's emitted. But it's so predictable that you can produce very precise audio out of that effect. Now, the question is, where is the sound made? Instead of being made on the face of the cone, it's made at literally billions of little independent points along this narrow column in the air. And so when I aim it towards you, what you hear is made right next to your ears. We've got the military had just deployed some of these into Iraq, where you can put fake troop movements a quarter of a mile away on a hillside. Or you can whisper in the ear of a supposed terrorist some biblical verse. I'm serious. And they have these infrared devices that can look at their countenance and see a fraction of a degree Kelvin in temperature shift from 100 yards away when they play this thing. And so another way of hopefully determining who's friendly and who isn't. We make a version of this which puts out 155 decibels. Pain is 120. So it allows you to go nearly a mile away and communicate with people, and there can be a public beach just off to the side and they don't even know it's turned on. We sell those to the military presently for about $70,000, and they're buying them as fast as we can make them. We put it on a turret with a camera so that when they shoot at you, you're over there and it's there. Let me give you, in the last minute, one more quick demo of this guy, for those of you that haven't heard it. Never tell if it's on. If you haven't heard it, raise your hand. Getting it? Over there. Get the cameraman. Yeah, there you go.
And then with, they call it synthetic telepathy. Microwaves can go right into the brain, and you hear a voice. And the psychiatrists beforehand, or the investigators, they would know a voice which you found comforting. Now, for a lady, it may be, if she loved her grandfather, it would be her grandfather's voice.
Oh, really?
If you are religious, it would be an angel, or Jesus, or Mohammed, or somebody. But when you've been in for 30 hours, and you're hallucinating, then the voice comes in. And of course, they can do this straight through the wall.
Yes.
The voice comes in, very soft, very soothing, very calming, Are you in trouble? I really am so sorry. Let me help. And over months or years, however long it takes, you will come just to rely on this voice. And if you don't do what this voice suggests, then the voice disappears and you're back in trouble. So you learn, a bit like heroin,
Yes.
you learn to depend on this very friendly voice. And if you talk to the voice and you're agreeable with the voice, you get food and you get light and then when you go home, the voice can wake you up in the middle of the night when you're sleeping and ask you questions and then once you are absolutely, totally dependent on the voice, like heroin, it can say, now, the problem that you've been through was caused by, and it could be a religious sect, it could be a group of people,
Yeah, they always come with a false flag.
a group of people, dark-skinned, fair-skinned, whatever, but it will be somebody. And they would say, now what I need you to do is help us defeat these people. And the next thing you've got is a bomber or a murderer, and it can be done. It is.
For example, Mikhailo Mikhailovich, he was convicted of killing the Swedish Foreign Minister Anna Lindh in 2003.
Yep.
He said, I had so strong voices in my head,
Yep.
they gave the order to kill her.
Yep.
And that was for me a clear evidence that he was mind controlled, that he is innocent, he was just a tool.
Yep, but of course you can't prove it. And the government will say you're mad, lock him away.
Yes.
But it's a success. And if you wanted a single person, all you have to do with the person is say, well, the only person stopping you reaching a normal life is Mr. Smith. And as long as Mr. Smith is alive, you are going to suffer this. And it's very easy. It's very easy to reprogram a brain. Very easy.
Yeah.
I mean, religious sects do it sometimes to convince people. Look at the big mass suicide we had years ago. I forgot, in America, Waco. It's very easy to retrain a brain.
Yes.
Very easy.
Yes, for me, my research shows clearly that Waco was also a mind control operation. That is for sure. And even Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma bomber, he was at those doctors making mind control and reprogramming.
But it's easily done, and of course the difficulty is finding out which people are having their minds changed by an agency deliberately, and those that really hate people and want to kill them anyway. But of course, it is a perfect weapon for that, and it's been going on for a while.
Is it possible to use it on any human, or are there some groups which are more difficult to remote control? In that
No, I think there are groups of people that it won't work on.
I think so too.
And I know this when I was, I use the word questioning, but when I was talking to spies and agents and international criminals and terrorists, it was over a cup of coffee, and I spoke to them as if they were ladies and gentlemen, like I'm talking to you. And if they wanted to talk, they did, and if they didn't, they didn't. But over the years, 11 years, there was only one that I never, ever managed to get anything from at all. There was one. And there are people who can resist.
Do you believe that a technology exists wherein speech can be encoded and transmitted via microwaves so that it can be heard inside the human skull without the use of a receiver?
I became totally immersed in hearing voices. Are you delusional?
You could actually hear voices in your head from microwave being the carrier band heating up the temporal lobes.
Whenever I hear somebody talking to me about microwaves or stuff like that being zoomed into their head,
There have been recent advances in acoustic technology which can transmit sound great distances with a very narrow target range. The long-range acoustic device is one such technology and is currently employed by both military and commercial sea vessels to deter potential attackers. In San Diego, California, Woody Norris, developer of the LRAD, describes another of his acoustic technologies known as hypersonic sound.
It's kind of like radio stations, except in this case, you don't need a receiver. To hear a radio station, I gotta have a receiver. With this, the mixing actually happens in the air, and you hear it without any other device. So if I aim it at you, and it happens to hit both of your ears, and I'm reluctant to say this, it'll be as though the sound is inside your head. This time I'll come all the way around in case you're getting a lot of echo from the room. Much of it is people pleading for help because they've been hearing voices in their head for years. And now this technology explains it. If it's my sound, turn your head, plug your ears, cover your head, sound goes away. If it doesn't, it's not me.
Hypersonic sound is perceived through the external ear of the subject, and therefore cannot be classified as V2K, the military acronym for voice-to-skull technology, which relies on a scientifically documented phenomenon known as the microwave auditory effect.
The observation of the phenomena came way back during the Second World War, and the radar operators, accidentally noticed that when they stand in front of the radar, sometimes they can hear clicks in their head. Somebody by the name of Alan Fry, who had talked to some of the radar operators based on their report, and he conducted a very simple laboratory experiment, indeed showed that human beings can hear the radar pulses. They were not just making it up.
They wanted to know what the significance of something like this would be if man had another sensory motor input. And of course, the possibilities are staggering. Like you have another sense like sight, only you're not using it. What do you think that would imply? It means you're walking around being blind to something that's constantly giving you inputs, but you're not aware of it. Well, the first implication on that would be a weapon.
There was some concerns because the American embassy in Moscow was reported to have been bombarded by microwaves. So the speculation was that are they trying to gather intelligence, or are they trying to actually mess with the brains of the embassy personnel? So there was some experiments being conducted. Of course, then they were involved in some other things which I'm not involved in, which are classified in Nature.
Dr. Lin configured the equipment for the 1973 experiment performed at the Walter Reed Army Research Institute, wherein the experimenters successfully encoded speech and transmitted it via microwaves. The subject of the experiment, Dr. Joseph C. Sharp, was able to hear the spoken words for 1 through 10, and the results were published in the Journal of the American Psychological Association. And while Dr. Sharp verified these results during a personal interview with the filmmakers, he declined to have his voice or image recorded, stating that the technology was still too controversial.
In ordinary sound perception, sound that goes into the ear canal gets amplified by the small bones in the middle ear and then gets to the inner ear where the cochlea resides, and in the cochlea is converted to electrical impulse. But fundamentally, the physical phenomena that enables it is mechanical movement of particles. So the mechanical wave transmitted by the bones of the middle ear gets converted at the inner ear into the electrical impulses. But in the case of a microwave auditory effect, the source is electromagnetic. So if you expose the biological tissue to a pulse of microwave energy, the tissue expands and induces a vibration. Instead of going through the middle ear, the microwave-induced vibration gets propagated to the inner ear directly, and at the inner ear is converted to electrical impulses again. And in this case, a vibration in the human tissue, if the tissue is the head, for example, would fall within the auditory range of a human subject.
All applicants for voluntary admission are held a minimum of 15 days for examination before they may be released.